She was rejected by everyone because of her body, deemed impossible to love. But then, something unexpected happened. An Apache warrior came into her life and showed a kind of love no man in the West had ever shown. You won't believe what he did for her. Hey there. Thanks for being here. Leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you think of the story. Let's keep going. Emily stared at her reflection in the murky well water for the last time. Her mother's words still echoed in her ears like stones falling into deep waters. You leave at dawn. There were no tears. The tears had dried up long ago, leaving only a silent acceptance that weighed on her shoulders like an invisible cloak. At 20, she knew well the whispers of the other women when she walked through the stone streets of the small town of Millbrook, Colorado. Poor Emily. She'll never find a husband to beg. No man would want her. The Thompsons must be desperate to get rid of her. She touched the coarse fabric of her gray dress, the same one she had worn for 3 years. Her mother had never seen reason to buy her new clothes. Why would she? There were no dances in her future, no courtships on the porch, no children playing at her knees. But now there was Nathaniel, an Apache man she had never seen, whose name sounded strange on her tongue. A peace agreement sealed with her life, as if she were a coin traded between worlds that had never understood each other. Emily turned away from the well. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. It was her last night at home, though this had never truly been a home. The wagon wheels creaked against the dusty trail, each rotation carrying Emily further from everything she had ever known. Her father sat rigid beside the driver, his weathered hands clasped tightly around his hat. He hadn't spoken since they left Millbrook 3 hours ago. Emily pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, though the morning sun was already warm against her face. The Colorado landscape stretched endlessly before them, rolling hills dotted with sagebrush, and the occasional cluster of aspen trees. She had never traveled this far from town before. How much longer? She asked quietly. Her father glanced at the driver, a grizzled man named Buck who had been hired to guide them to the Apache settlement. Buck spat tobacco juice over the side of the wagon before answering. Another day's ride, miss, maybe 2. If the weather turns. Emily nodded and returned her gaze to the horizon. She tried to imagine what Nathaniel might look like, what his voice would sound like, whether he would be kind or cruel. But each time she began to form a picture in her mind. The image dissolved like morning mist. You'll do well to remember, her father said suddenly, his voice cutting through her thoughts. This is bigger than you, Emily. This peace between our people and theirs. It matters. She wanted to ask him what she was supposed to do if Nathaniel rejected her, if he found her as undesirable as the men back home. But the words stuck in her throat like thorns. Instead, she watched a red-tailed hawk circle high above them, its wings catching the light as it rode the warm air currents. There was something beautiful about its solitude, the way it moved through the sky without needing anyone or anything. I packed your grandmother's silver brush, her father continued, his voice softer now. Your mother thought, well, she thought you might want something familiar. Emily touched the small canvas bag at her feet. Inside were the few belongings she had been allowed to bring, to dresses, a worn copy of poems by Emily Dickinson that had been a gift from the school teacher, and now her grandmother's brush. It seemed like such a small collection to represent an entire life. Tell me about him, she said. About Nathaniel. Her father was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he cleared his throat. He's respected among his people, a good hunter. Lost his wife in the fever 2 winters ago. He paused. The tribal leader, Chief Running Bear, he speaks highly of him. Emily felt something twist in her stomach. A widower, a man who had loved someone else, who might always love someone else. She wondered if his first wife had been beautiful, if she had been small and delicate the way women were supposed to be. Was she? Emily began, then stopped herself. It didn't matter. Nothing about the past mattered now. The wagon hit a particularly deep rut, jolting her from her thoughts, but muttered something under his breath about the condition of the trail. But Emily barely heard him. She was thinking about the red-tailed hawk, wondering if it had ever felt afraid of flying alone into unknown territory. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Emily closed her eyes and tried to imagine herself as brave as that solitary bird. Tomorrow, she would meet the man who would become her husband. Tomorrow, her new life would begin, whether she was ready or not. The Apache settlement appeared like a mirage against the late afternoon sun, a cluster of canvas tipis and wooden structures, nestled in a valley between two red rock formations. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs as the wagon descended the winding path toward what would become her new home. Children stopped their games to stare at the approaching wagon. Women paused in their daily tasks, their dark eyes following Emily's every movement. She felt exposed, examined, like a specimen under glass. Her hand smoothed down her best dress of faded blue cotton that her mother had insisted she wear. For this first meeting, stay calm, her father whispered, though his own voice betrayed his nervousness. Remember what we discussed. The wagon came to a stop near the center of the settlement, where a group of men had gathered. Emily's eyes swept over their faces, searching for one that might belong to Nathaniel. But they all seemed to blur together in her anxiety. Then she saw him. He stood slightly apart from the others, taller than most, with long black hair that caught the golden light. His clothing was simple buckskin shirt and dark trousers, but he carried himself with a quiet dignity that made Emily's breath catch in her throat. When their eyes met across the distance, she expected to see judgment, disappointment, or worse, indifference. Instead, she found something she had never encountered before: curiosity without cruelty. Chief Running Bear approached their wagon, his weathered face kind but serious. He spoke first in Apache to the gathered crowd, his voice carrying the weight of ceremony and tradition. Then he turned to Emily's father. "Welcome, Thomas Thompson. You have brought your daughter as we agreed." Emily's father climbed down from the wagon and helped her descend. Her legs felt unsteady after the long journey, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet the gazes that surrounded her with as much dignity as she could muster. "This is Emily," her father said simply. "She comes with our family's blessing and our hopes for peace between our peoples." Chief Running Bear nodded solemnly, then gestured toward Nathaniel. "And this is Nathaniel Silver Wolf, son of the Wolf clan, keeper of the old stories." Nathaniel stepped forward, and Emily noticed that he moved with the fluid grace of someone completely at home in his own skin. When he spoke, his English was careful but clear, touched with an accent that made familiar words sound like music. "Emily Thompson," he said, and her name sounded different and his voice softer, somehow more precious. "You are welcome here." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. All her life, she had been introduced as the daughter who would never marry, the burden her family carried. Now she was being welcomed, not as a problem to be solved, but simply as herself. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. The silence that followed wasn't awkward but thoughtful, as if everyone present understood the significance of this moment. Emily found herself studying Nathaniel's face, the strong line of his jaw, the laugh lines around his eyes, the way he looked at her without flinching or turning away. An elderly woman approached carrying a clay bowl filled with water and sweet-smelling herbs. She offered it first to Emily's father, then to Emily, speaking in Apache. Nathaniel translated quietly. "She says the water will wash away the dust of your old path, so you may walk clean into your new life." Emily accepted the bowl with trembling hands. The water was cool against her palms, and she could smell sage and something else she couldn't identify, something that reminded her of rain on summer earth. As she raised the bowl to her lips, she caught Nathaniel watching her with those same curious eyes. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like apologizing for taking up space in the world. Emily's father left at dawn without ceremony, his wagon disappearing into the morning mist like a retreating ghost. She stood at the edge of the settlement, watching until even the dust settled back to earth, and realized she felt more relief than sorrow at his departure. Nathaniel appeared beside her, silent as the shadows that moved with the rising sun. He didn't speak, didn't offer empty words of comfort about missing home. Instead, he simply stood with her in the quiet morning air, and somehow his presence said more than any speech could have. "Come," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will show you." He led her through the settlement, pointing to places with gentle gestures rather than words. The cooking fires where the women prepared meals, the stream that provided fresh water, the meadow where horses grazed in the early light. Each location was presented without expectation, as if he understood she needed time to absorb this new world at her own pace. They paused near a group of children who were weaving grass into small baskets under the guidance of an elderly woman. One little girl, no more than 6, looked up at Emily with bright, curious eyes and said something in Apache. Nathaniel smiled, the first real smile Emily had seen from him, and responded in the same language. "What did she say?" Emily asked. "She wants to know if you know how to weave grass." "She says your hands look gentle." Emily stared down at her hands, surprised. All her life, she had been told her hands were too large, too clumsy for delicate work. But this child saw gentleness where others had seen awkwardness. I don't know how," Emily admitted. The little girl seemed to understand even without translation. She scrambled to her feet and took Emily's hand, leading her to sit on the woven mat. With infinite patience, she began showing Emily how to bend the grass, how to weave it through itself to create something strong and beautiful. Nathaniel watched from nearby, and when Emily glanced up at him, she found something soft in his expression. Not pity, she had seen enough pity to recognize it, but something warmer. Approval, perhaps, or simply acceptance of this moment as it was. The morning passed quietly. Emily learned that the little girl's name was Ayana, which meant eternal blossom. She learned that the elderly woman was Nathaniel's aunt, and that she had been the one to teach all the children of the settlement the old ways of weaving. When the sun reached its peak, Nathaniel's aunt prepared a simple meal of corn cakes and berry tea. She spoke to Emily in Apache, her voice kind and encouraging. Though Emily understood none of the words, but she understood the tone, the way the woman included her in the circle without question or judgment. "She says you have patient hands." Nathaniel translated. "She says this is good for a woman who will learn our ways." Emily looked down at the small, imperfect basket she had woven. It was crooked in places, loose in others, but it held together. It was hers, made with her own hands. In this place where no one had whispered about her shortcomings. "Will you teach me?" she asked Nathaniel suddenly. "Your language." He was quiet for so long that she began to regret the question. Perhaps it was presumptuous of her to ask. Perhaps he didn't intend for her to stay long enough to need such knowledge. But then he nodded. A single, decisive movement each morning, he said. "We will begin with simple words." That evening, as the settlement settled into the peaceful rhythms of night, Nathaniel showed Emily to a small tipi that had been prepared for her. It was modest but clean, with soft fur spread on the ground and a small fire pit in the center. Her few belongings had been placed carefully near the back wall. "You will be safe here," he said, standing in the entrance. "No one will disturb your rest." Emily wanted to thank him, to find words that could express what this day had meant to her, the kindness of strangers, the feeling of being included rather than tolerated. But the words seemed too small for such large feelings. "Nathaniel," she said as he turned to leave. He paused, waiting. "Thank you for seeing me," she whispered in the flickering light of the fire. She thought she saw him smile again before he disappeared into the night, leaving her alone with a strange new feeling that, for the first time in her life, she might truly belong somewhere. ****. Nathaniel said, pointing to himself in the gray light of dawn. Emily repeated the word carefully, testing its shape in her mouth. She Asterisk me asterisk, he continued, his finger moving to indicate her. You, me, she echoed, surprised by how natural the sounds felt on her tongue. They sat beside the stream that bordered the settlement, their voices barely audible above the gentle murmur of water over stones. Nathaniel had appeared in her tipi before sunrise, carrying a small leather pouch and wearing the same patient expression she was beginning to recognize as distinctly his. Asterisk Tio asterisk, he said, cupping water in his hands. Water. Emily watched the liquid slip through his fingers like liquid silver in the morning light. Asterisk Tio asterisk, she repeated, and he nodded his approval. For an hour they continued this way, building a bridge of words between their worlds. Sun asterisk Jahonai asterisk, sky asterisk Yadi asterisk, bird asterisk city asterisk. Each new word felt like a small gift, something precious that Nathaniel was choosing to share with her. When a mockingbird landed on a nearby branch and began its elaborate song, Emily pointed to it and said, asterisk city asterisk. Nathaniel's eyes crinkled. At the corners, yes, but this one is asterisk Hashevi asterisk, the one who borrows other songs. Emily laughed before she could stop herself, the sound surprising them both. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed, truly laughed, without worrying about how it might sound to others or whether she had permission to feel joy. That's beautiful, she said, the one who borrows other songs. In English, we call it a mockingbird, but that sounds harsh compared to your word. Many English words sound harsh, Nathaniel observed, but his tone held no judgment. Your language cuts, ours flows like water. They walked back toward the settlement as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows between the tipis. Emily found herself matching Nathaniel's unhurried pace, noticing how he moved with such awareness of his surroundings, pausing when a child ran past chasing a puppy, stepping aside when an elder needed to pass, acknowledging each person they encountered with a small nod or gesture. Asterisk Yadi asterisk, called Ayana, running up to them with her arms full of wild flowers. Emily looked questioningly at Nathaniel. It means it is good, a greeting, but also more. It is saying all is well. I see you. We are in harmony. Asterisk Yadi asterisk. Ayana, Emily replied carefully, and the little girl beamed before scampering away to share her flowers with her grandmother. As they reached the center of the settlement, Emily noticed other women beginning their daily tasks. Some were grinding corn, others tending fires or preparing hides. She watched them work with easy efficiency, their movements graceful and purposeful. In Millbrook, such communal activity had always excluded her. Here, she found herself wondering what useful role she might fill. I should help, she said, more to herself than to Nathaniel. With what? He asked. Emily gestured vaguely at the bustling activity around them. Something, anything. I don't know what I'm good at, but surely there's something. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment. You are good at listening, he said finally. This is not a small thing. Before Emily could ask what he meant, Anne approached them. She spoke rapidly in Apache, her hands gesturing toward the hills beyond the settlement. Nathaniel listened intently, then nodded. There are plants that need gathering today, he explained to Emily. Medicine plants. Would you like to come and learn? Emily's heart quickened. In her old life, she had been discouraged from such activities, told she was too clumsy, too likely to make mistakes. But here was an invitation, offered without hesitation or qualification. Yes, she said, then corrected herself. I mean, how do you say yes in your language? Asterisk ow asterisk, Nathaniel replied, and she heard something like warmth in his voice. Asterisk ow asterisk, Emily said firmly, tasting the word like a promise. As they prepared to leave the settlement, Nathaniel's aunt pressed a small gathering basket into Emily's hands. The woman spoke softly in Apache, her weathered fingers briefly covering Emily's on the basket handle. She says the plants will teach you their names if you listen with your heart. Nathaniel translated. Emily looked down at the basket, simple, functional, beautiful in its practicality. No one had ever trusted her with something important before, something that mattered to the well-being of others. "Tell her I will listen," Emily said quietly. "Tell her I will learn." As they set out toward the hills, the morning sun warm on their backs, Emily felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in her life, she was walking towards something instead of away from it. And beside her walked a man who had given her the gift of new words, seeds that might, with time and care, grow into a new understanding of herself and the world around her. The hillside stretched before them like a living tapestry, dotted with plants Emily had never learned to name. Nathaniel moved through the landscape with the confidence of someone reading a familiar book, pausing here and there to examine leaves, to touch bark, to breathe in the scent of growing things. "This one," he said, kneeling beside a cluster of small purple flowers, *Z, wheat *, red medicine, good for wounds that won't heal. Emily knelt beside him, watching as his fingers gently parted the leaves to show her the plant's structure. His hands were careful, respectful, as if he understood that he was handling something sacred. "How do you know which part to use?" she asked. "My grandmother taught me, and her grandmother before her." He carefully picked a few stems, leaving the roots undisturbed. "The plant tells you, if you listen long enough." Emily tried to imagine what it might feel like to have such deep knowledge passed down through generations, to understand the world in a way that connected past and future. Her own grandmother had taught her only to embroider and to keep her voice low in public. They moved slowly up the hillside, Nathaniel pointing out plants that looked identical to Emily's untrained eye but which he could distinguish with ease. *Chilla we for stomach troubles, *C for fevers, *Kazibi Nitwizi for women's monthly pain. Something Emily had never heard spoken of openly by any man. "In Millbrook," she said carefully, "men don't speak of such things." "Why?" Nathaniel asked, genuinely curious. Emily considered this. "I'm not sure. Shame, perhaps, or the belief that women's bodies are unclean." Nathaniel paused in his gathering, looking at her with something that might have been confusion. The body that creates life is unclean. Put that way, it did sound foolish. Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment about the topic, but from recognition of how backward her people's thinking seemed in comparison. "Your people see things differently," she observed. "We see the world as connected," he replied simply. Nothing lives separately from everything else. As they worked, Emily found herself studying Nathaniel's profile when she thought he wasn't looking. There was something peaceful about being near him, something that made her shoulders relax in a way they never had around other men. He didn't watch her for mistakes or signs of inadequacy. He simply included her in the work, as if her presence was natural and expected. "Tell me about your wife," she said suddenly, then immediately regretted the words. Nathaniel's hand still on the plant he was examining. Emily waited for him to tell her it was none of her concern, or to retreat into the kind of cold silence that meant a boundary had been crossed. Instead, he sat back on his heels and looked out across the valley below. Her name was *Zai*. "Morning, woman." She laughed like water running over stones. His voice was quiet but steady. "She died when the fever came through our settlement 2 winters ago. She was trying to help care for the children who were sick." "I'm sorry," Emily said, and meant it. "She would have liked you," he said after a moment. "She always said the strongest medicine comes from those who understand suffering." Emily felt something twist in her chest. Not jealousy, exactly, but a recognition of how deeply Nathaniel had loved, how completely he had been loved in return. She wondered if she would ever know such connection, or if she was destined to always be the second choice, the replacement for something better. "I'm not trying to replace her," she said quietly. Nathaniel turned to look at her fully then, his dark eyes serious. "No one could replace her, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for something new." They worked in comfortable silence after that, filling their baskets with the mountain's medicine. As the sun climbed higher, Emily found herself thinking about roots that grew deep and connections that lasted beyond death, about the difference between replacement and renewal. When they finally turned to head back to the settlement, Emily's basket was full of plants whose names she was beginning to remember, whose purposes she was starting to understand. More than that, she carried with her the first real conversation she had ever had with a man who saw her as a person worth knowing. 3 weeks passed like water flowing around stones, gentle, persistent, reshaping everything in its path. Emily's hands grew confident with the daily tasks of the settlement. She learned to prepare corn cakes the way Nathaniel's aunt preferred, to recognize the sound of children needing comfort, to move through the community without the constant weight of scrutiny she had carried in Millbrook. But it was the evenings that surprised her most. Each night, as the cooking fires dimmed to glowing embers, Nathaniel would appear at her tipi with something to share, sometimes a new word in Apache, sometimes a story about the plants they had gathered, sometimes just silence that felt companionable rather than empty. He never presumed to enter her dwelling, never made her feel obligated to entertain him. He simply made himself available, like a door left open rather than one demanding to be walked through. Tonight, he brought news that made Emily's stomach clench with unexpected anxiety. Tomorrow, the women will teach you to prepare hides, he said, settling onto the ground beside her fire. It is important work. The whole family depends on it. Emily's hands tightened around the clay cup of tea she held. What if I'm not good at it? What if I ruin the hide? Nathaniel studied her face. In the firelight, you are afraid. It wasn't a question, and Emily felt exposed by his gentle observation. She had grown so comfortable in their daily routines that she had almost forgotten the underlying truth of her situation. She was still the woman no one had wanted, still the burden that had been passed from one people to another. In Millbrook, she said slowly, when I tried to help with important tasks, I usually made them worse. My mother said I had clumsy hands, that I thought too much and moved too little. Your mother was wrong. The words came so simply, so matter-of-factly, that Emily looked up in surprise. Nathaniel was watching the fire, his expression thoughtful. I have watched your hands, he continued. They are careful, respectful. They listen before they act. Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. You've been watching my hands. Something shifted in Nathaniel's expression, a moment of vulnerability that he quickly covered. I watch everything, he said. It is how I learn what matters. The silence that followed felt different from their usual comfortable quiet. There was something unsaid hanging between them, something that made Emily's heart beat faster even though she couldn't name what it was. Nathaniel, she said carefully, why did you agree to this marriage, truly? He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was tired of being alone, and because Chief Running Bear said you had sad eyes. Like someone who understood what it meant to lose something important. Emily felt something break open in her chest, not painful, but like the cracking of ice in spring, allowing something underneath to finally breathe. What did you lose? She asked. Hope, he said simply. After Morning Woman died, I thought I would never want to build a life with someone again. But hope is like grass after fire, it comes back even when you're not looking for it. Emily thought about the weeks she had spent here, about the gradual softening of her expectations, the way she had begun to imagine a future that extended beyond mere survival. Is that what I am? She asked quietly. You're returning hope. Nathaniel looked at her then, really looked at her, with an expression that made her feel seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. You are becoming something I didn't know I was looking for, he said, in the dying light of the fire. Emily felt the last of her old life certainties crumble away. She was no longer the unwanted daughter, no longer the woman who took up too much space in the world. She was becoming something new, something she didn't yet understand, but was beginning to trust. Tomorrow she would learn to work the hides. Tonight, she would sit with this strange, wonderful feeling of being wanted exactly as she was. The morning brought with it the scent of sage smoke and the sound of women's voices. Carrying across the settlement, Emily emerged from her tipi to find a circle of women gathered around several deer hides, stretched on wooden frames, their hands moving with practiced efficiency as they scraped away the last bits of flesh and Fat Nathaniel's aunt, Shady AHDW*, from the mountain, gestured for Emily to join them. The other women made space for her without hesitation, though Emily could feel their curious glances as she settled onto the woven mat. Beside them, Emily sat a young woman, with intricate silver jewelry adorning her neck. This was Tiahidliini water flows together, whom Emily had seen caring for 3 small children, who followed her everywhere like devoted shadows. Emily replied, pleased that the greeting now came naturally to her tongue. From the mountain placed a curved scraping tool in Emily's hands, its bone handle worn smooth by countless previous users. She spoke in Apache, her words patient and encouraging, while water flows together translated. She says the hide will teach you its secrets, but you must listen with your hands as well as your eyes. Emily positioned herself before the stretched hide, watching as from the mountain demonstrated the proper angle of the scraper, the amount of pressure needed, the rhythm that would efficiently remove the remaining tissue without damaging the hide itself. When Emily began to work, her first strokes were hesitant, uncertain. She had been prepared for impatience, for the kind of sharp correction she had grown accustomed to in Millbrook. Instead, from the mountain simply placed her weathered hands over Emily's, guiding her movements until the rhythm became natural. Feel the hide speaking to you. Water flows together translated as from the mountain continued her gentle instruction. Too hard and you will cut through. Too soft and the work will never be finished. Like all things in life, it requires balance. As the morning progressed, Emily found herself falling into the meditative rhythm of the work. The repetitive motion freed her mind to wander, and she became aware of the conversation flowing around her, stories about children's antics, discussion of which plants were showing signs of the approaching autumn, gentle teasing between the women about whose husband had forgotten to bring home the fish he had promised. She was surprised to realize that she was no longer thinking in English, and then translating to Apache. Somewhere in the weeks since her arrival, the 2 languages had begun to weave together in her mind like strands in a basket. Emily called a voice behind her. She turned to see Ayana approaching with her characteristic bound of enthusiasm. But the little girl stopped short when she saw what Emily was doing. Her eyes widened with something that looked like awe. Najoni Ayana whispered, pointing to Emily's section of the hide. Emily looked down at her work, expecting to see the stakes and imperfections. Instead, she saw smooth, even scraping as good as any of the other women's work, perhaps better than some. What does Najoni mean? Emily asked. Water flows together. Beautiful, came the reply, followed by approving nods from the other women. Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks, but this time it was not from shame or embarrassment. It was from the unfamiliar sensation of being praised for something she had created with her own hands. From the mountain spoke again, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Water flows together smiled as she translated. She says your hands remember something they never learned. She says you have the touch of someone whose grandmothers worked hides, even if you never knew them. As the women returned to their work, Emily found herself thinking about inheritance, not the kind that came in the form of money or property, but the kind that lived in the body, in the wisdom of hands that seemed to understand tasks they had never been taught. Perhaps her body had always known how to be useful, how to create beautiful things. Perhaps it had simply been waiting for the right place, the right teachers, the right moment to reveal what it had always carried within it. When Nathaniel appeared at the edge of the circle, near midday, Emily looked up from her work with flour, dusting her hands and satisfaction warming her chest. Their eyes met across the working space, and she saw something in his expression that she was beginning to recognize: pride. But not the possessive kind. The quiet pride of someone watching another person discover their own capabilities. She smiled at him then, unguarded and genuine. And for the first time in her life, she didn't worry about how that smile might look to others. The autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and the promise of changing seasons. When disaster struck in the most ordinary way imaginable, Emily was helping water flows together carry water from the stream when little Ayana came running toward them, her face streaked with tears and mud. She gnawed Sue's. She cried, holding up the soggy remains of what had once been a carefully woven grass doll. Emily set down her water jug and knelt to Ayana's level. Even though she didn't understand all the words, the child's distress was universal. The particular grief of a beloved toy lost to carelessness and creek water. Kagashi. Emily asked gently, using one of the question words Nathaniel had taught her. What happened? Through hiccuping sobs and a mixture of Apache and broken English, the story emerged. Ayana had been playing by the stream with her doll, pretending to give it a bath. When the current had caught it and swept it away, she had tried to follow, slipping into the muddy bank. In her desperation to retrieve her treasure, without thinking, Emily began to examine the sodden doll. Most people would have declared it ruined beyond repair, but Emily's hands found the bones of its construction still intact beneath the waterlogged exterior. ***, she murmured, surprising herself by thinking in Apache. We can fix this. Emily looked around and spotted a patch of the same type of grass Ayana had originally used. She began gathering armfuls of the golden stalks, her movements quick and sure. Ayana watched with growing hope as Emily sat cross-legged on the ground and began to carefully unwrap the damaged sections of the doll. Other children began to gather, drawn by curiosity. Then some of the women approached, including from the mountain, who observed Emily's work with interest. Emily worked methodically, salvaging what could be saved and replacing what could not. Her fingers moved with the same careful attention she had learned to bring to hide work, to plant gathering, to all the tasks that had begun to feel like extensions of her own body. As she worked, she began to hum a half-remembered tune from her childhood that her grandmother had sung while mending clothes. The melody seemed to calm Ayana, whose tears had stopped flowing and been replaced by fascination of watching her beloved toy being reborn. Najoni Yashti *, said one of the watching children. Beautiful singing. Emily's hand stilled for a moment. She had forgotten that others could hear her, forgotten to be self-conscious about the sound of her own voice. In Millbrook, she had been told that her voice was too deep, too prominent for a woman. Here, it was simply being acknowledged as part of the work she was doing. When she finished, the doll was not exactly as it had been before. Some of the original weaving patterns had been lost, replaced by ones that came naturally to Emily's hands. But it was whole again, sturdy and beautiful in its own way. Ayana took the restored doll with reverent care, pressing it to her chest and whispering what Emily recognized as thanks. But then the little girl did something unexpected. She began to giggle, a sound of pure delight that spread like ripples through the gathered crowd. Soon all the children were laughing, not at Emily, but with her, at the joy of something lost being found again, something broken being made whole. The sound drew more people, including Nathaniel, who appeared at the edge of the group with a question in his eyes. From the mountain spoke to him in rapid Apache, gesturing toward Emily and the doll. Emily watched Nathaniel's face as he listened, saw something shift in his expression: surprise, pleasure, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. When the crowd began to disperse, Nathaniel approached Emily where she still sat, surrounded by grass stems and the remnants of her repair work. He said quietly, his voice carrying a note she had never heard before. What does that mean? Emily asked. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, as if searching for the right English words. It means woman who heals things, but also woman who makes things whole again. Emily looked down at her grass-stained hands, at the tools of mending scattered around her. For the first time in her life, she understood that her size, her careful movements, her tendency to think before acting, all the things that had made her unsuitable in Millbrook, were exactly what made her valuable here. I like the sound of that, she said softly, and when Nathaniel smiled at her then, Emily realized that she was no longer waiting for her new life to begin. It was already here, woven into her hands and her voice and the laughter of children who saw her as someone who could fix what was broken. The emergency came without warning, as emergencies do. Emily was grinding corn from the mountain when they heard the commotion shouts. From the edge of the settlement, the sound of running feet, voices sharp with alarm. A hunting party had returned early, carrying between them a young man whose leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. Emily recognized him as Hasty Nyazi little man, barely 18 and known for his eagerness to prove himself as a hunter. The men set him down gently near the central fire, and Emily could see sweat beating on the boy's forehead despite the cool autumn air. His breathing came in short, pained gasps, and his leg was clearly badly broken, with bone pressing against the skin in a way that made several onlookers turn away. Katali medicine man, the settlement's healer, was away visiting another Apache community and wouldn't return for days. The gravity of the situation settled over the crowd like a heavy blanket. Nathaniel appeared beside Emily, his face grim. "We need to set the bone ourselves," he said quietly. "If we wait for Hatali to return, the leg may be lost." Emily watched as several of the men conferred, their voices tense with responsibility and uncertainty. She had seen enough broken bones in Millbrook to know that this was the kind of injury that could cripple a young man for life if handled incorrectly, or kill him if infection set in. "I've seen this done before," she said suddenly, surprising herself. The conversation stopped. Every face turned toward her, and Emily felt the familiar flutter of panic at being the center of attention. But then she looked at little man, saw the fear in his eyes beneath the pain, and something steady settled in her chest. "In Millbrook, there was a doctor who let me watch when he treated injuries," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "My size, it meant I could help hold patients still when they needed to be moved. I learned how bones need to align, how to tell if the blood flow is still good." Chief Running Bear stepped forward, his weathered face thoughtful. He spoke in Apache to the gathered crowd, then turned to Emily. "Show us," he said simply. Emily knelt beside little man, her hands hovering over his injured leg without touching. She could see exactly what needed to be done: the bone fragments that needed to be guided back into position, the angle required to restore proper alignment. "I'll need help," she said, looking up at Nathaniel. "Someone to hold his shoulders, someone else to support his thigh while I work." Nathaniel nodded and positioned himself at little man's head, speaking softly to the young man in Apache words of comfort and encouragement. Water flows together took her place at his thigh, her hands gentle but firm. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, remembering everything she had observed in Dr. Morrison's office back in Millbrook. The old physician had been gruff but skilled, and he had explained his techniques to Emily because, as he had said, "You've got steady hands and you're not squeamish. That's rarer than you'd think." She opened her eyes and looked at little man. Kagoene she said gently. "Are you ready?" He nodded, gripping Nathaniel's hand. What followed required all of Emily's concentration and care. She worked slowly, feeling for the position of bone fragments, guiding them back into alignment with gentle, steady pressure. Little man cried out several times, but he held still, trusting her completely. When the bone finally settled into its proper position, Emily felt it like a puzzle piece clicking into place. She looked up to find dozens of eyes watching her, and saw something in those faces that she had never seen directed toward her before: respect, gratitude, genuine admiration. Asterisk Najoni asterisk whispered from the mountain, and Emily understood she wasn't talking about beauty in the conventional sense, but about something deeper: the beauty of competence, of being exactly what was needed in the moment it was needed. As they carefully splinted little man's leg with straight branches and soft hide, Emily became aware that Nathaniel was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. Asterisk aza inahoan asterisk, he said softly, repeating the phrase from days before. But this time, Emily heard something different in his voice: not just recognition of her healing abilities, but something warmer, more personal. Asterisk ow asterisk, she replied simply, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed in herself. She was a woman who healed things. She was a woman who made broken things whole, and perhaps, most importantly, she was a woman who belonged exactly where she was. The riders appeared on the horizon like shadows against the pale morning sky, their dust cloud visible long before Emily could make out individual figures. She was checking on little man's healing leg when the lookouts called down from the ridge, their voices carrying across the settlement with news that made her blood run cold. White men approaching. 3 riders. One carries the territorial flag. Emily's hand stilled on the fresh bandages she was applying to little man's splint. Around the settlement, the normal rhythms of daily life shifted into something more watchful, more guarded. Children were called closer to their mothers. Men emerged from their work to stand in loose groups, their faces carefully neutral. Nathaniel found Emily beside the healing lodge, his expression unreadable. "They're coming for you," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to finish tying off little man's bandage before standing. Asterisk ow asterisk, she replied, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. The 3 riders dismounted at the edge of the settlement with the careful movements of men entering potentially hostile territory. Emily recognized the lead figure immediately: Samuel Morrison, Millbrook's mayor, and the man who had negotiated her transfer to the Apache in the first place. Behind him rode 2 younger men she didn't know, both wearing the kind of confident expressions that came from believing they represented civilization in a wilderness. Emily Thompson. Mayor Morrison called across the space between them, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We've come to take you home." The words hit Emily like cold water. Home for so many years. That word had represented safety, belonging, acceptance. Now it felt like a trap closing around her ankles. Chief Running Bear stepped forward, his diplomatic skills evident as he greeted the visitors with formal courtesy. "You are welcome in our settlement, Samuel Morrison. What brings you so far from your own people?" "We've come to correct a mistake," Morrison replied, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. "Recent events in our territory have made it clear that we acted hastily in arranging this exchange. Emily's family has reconsidered, and we're prepared to offer alternative terms for our peace agreement." Emily felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her family had reconsidered after months of silence. After giving her away like unwanted livestock, they suddenly wanted her back. "What alternative terms?" Chief Running Bear asked. The Emily could hear the steel beneath his courteous tone. One of the younger men stepped forward. "Cattle. 100 head of prime beef cattle, plus farming equipment and seed for next spring's planting." The settlement fell silent. Emily understood enough about economics to realize this was a substantial offer, far more valuable than one unwanted daughter had ever been worth to anyone. "You see," Morrison continued, his voice taking on the reasonable tone of a man explaining something obvious, "we've learned that Emily has certain useful skills that would benefit our own community. There's been talk of establishing a proper medical practice in Millbrook, and Emily could be trained to assist." Emily felt something crack inside her chest. They wanted her back, not because they valued her as a person, but because they had discovered she might be useful, just as they had given her away when she seemed worthless. Now they wanted to reclaim her when she proved valuable. And what does Emily want? Nathaniel asked quietly, speaking for the first time since the visitor's arrival. Morrison's laugh held no warmth. Emily is a daughter of Millbrook. She belongs with her own people, where she can contribute to the betterment of her community. Surely she understands that her duty, my duty, Emily interrupted, her voice cutting through Morrison's assumptions like a blade through cloth, is to choose my own life. The silence that followed was profound. Emily could feel every eye in the settlement upon her, could sense the weight of a moment that would define everything that came after. She looked at the three men from Millbrook, representatives of a world that had never seen her clearly, never valued her until they realized she might be profitable. Then she looked at the Apache community surrounding her, people who had welcomed her abilities, who had made space for her to become someone she had never imagined she could be. I appreciate the offer, Emily said, directing her words to Morrison, but speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. But I'm not going back. The mayor's face darkened. Emily, you're being foolish. These people are savages. You belong with civilization, with your own kind. These people, Emily said firmly, are my family now, and this is where I belong. Mayor Morrison's face flushed red at Emily's words, his composure cracking like ice under pressure. You don't understand what you're saying, girl. These people have filled your head with nonsense. You're a white woman, a Christian. You have obligations. I understand perfectly, Emily said, stepping forward. She was aware of Nathaniel moving closer to her side, not protectively, but supportively, like a tree offering shelter without blocking her light. I understand that for 20 years. I was told I was worthless, that no man would want me, that I was a burden my family had to bear. Her voice grew stronger with each word, carrying across the settlement like a bell tolling. I understand that you gave me away without tears, without ceremony, like livestock traded for peace. And now that I've proven useful, you want me back on your terms. One of the younger men shifted uncomfortably. Now see here, Emily, your parents are worried about you. They've asked us to bring you home where you belong, where I belong. Emily's laugh held no bitterness, only a clarity that surprised even her. I belong where people see my value without needing to profit from it. I belong where my hands are appreciated for their gentleness, not criticized for their size. I belong where my voice is heard, not silenced. Morrison's patience was clearly wearing thin. This is ridiculous. You're talking about staying with savages who don't even worship the true God. What will people say? What kind of life can you possibly have here? Before Emily could respond, from the mountain stepped forward. The elderly woman's presence commanded attention, and when she spoke in Apache, her words carried the weight of generations. Chief Running Bear translated, his voice respectful. She says Emily has healing hands blessed by the Great Spirit. She says Emily has learned to speak with plants and to mend what is broken. She says any people who would trade away such a gift do not deserve to receive it back. Water flows together, join them, speaking rapidly in Apache. Chief Running Bears. Translation made Morrison scowl deeper. She says Emily's children will grow strong in this place, knowing to languages, to ways of seeing the world. She says this makes them powerful, not divided. Emily felt her cheeks warm at the mention of children, but she didn't correct the assumption. In truth, she had begun to imagine a future here that included small hands learning to weave grass, young voices calling her name, a life built around more than mere survival. Emily, Morrison said, his tone shifting to one of forced patience, be reasonable. What future do you really have here? These people live in tents, for God's sake. They have no proper houses, no schools, no. They have community, Emily interrupted. They have respect for each person's gifts. They have elders who teach wisdom instead of shame. They have children who laugh without fear. She paused, looking directly at Morrison. They have love that doesn't come with conditions. Nathaniel spoke then, his voice quiet but carrying easily in the still air. The choice is Emily's. She has spoken. You should respect that. Morrison turned his attention to Nathaniel for the first time, his expression contemptuous. And what could you possibly offer her that civilization cannot? What kind of husband are you to a white woman? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire, and Emily felt something shift inside her chest. She realized that in all the weeks she had been here, she and Nathaniel had never spoken directly about their marriage, about what it meant or what it could become. He offers me myself, Emily said simply. He sees who I am, not who others think I should be. He doesn't try to change me or use me or make me smaller to fit someone else's idea of what a woman should be. She turned to look at Nathaniel then, really look at him, and found his dark eyes watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. There was admiration there, yes, but also something deeper, something that looked like love, true love, offered freely without expectation. I choose this life, Emily said, her voice carrying across the settlement with absolute certainty. I choose this place. I choose this man who has shown me kindness I never knew existed. And for the first time, she reached for Nathaniel's hand, taking it in hers with a gesture that spoke louder than any words could have. Morrison stared at Emily's hand clasped in Nathaniel's. For a long moment, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally a cold resignation. You're making a mistake that will follow you for the rest of your life, he said flatly. Don't come crawling back to Millbrook when you realize what you've thrown away. I won't, Emily replied with quiet certainty. The three men remounted their horses with sharp, angry movements as they prepared to ride away. Morrison turned back one final time. Your parents will be heartbroken, he called out, as if delivering a final blow. But Emily had moved beyond the reach of such weapons. My parents gave me away without a second thought, she said. They'll survive my absence as well as they survived my presence. As the dust from the departing riders settled, Emily became aware that she was still holding Nathaniel's hand. She started to pull away, suddenly self-conscious, but he gently tightened his grip. Stay, he said softly, and the word held more than instruction, it held invitation, hope, promise. Chief Running Bear approached them, his weathered face creased with something that might have been a smile. He spoke in Apache, his words formal and ceremonial, then switched to English. I said that any woman brave enough to speak truth to those who would diminish her deserves to be honored by her people. You have shown great courage today. Emily Silverwolf. Emily felt her breath catch. Silverwolf, Nathaniel's family name, now offered to her not as ownership, but as belonging. She looked up at Nathaniel questioningly. If you want it, he said, quietly. The name, the place beside me, all of it, freely given, never taken. Before Emily could respond, the settlement erupted in celebration. From the mountain began singing in Apache, her voice soon joined by other women. Children ran in circles, their laughter mixing with the song. Men brought out drums, their rhythmic beating seeming to echo the heartbeat of the earth itself. Water flows together appear beside Emily with a length of beautiful beaded fabric. For the ceremony, she explained, draping it over Emily's shoulders. When a woman chooses her path freely, when a man offers his name with an open heart, the spirits rejoice. Ceremony? Emily asked, overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of conflict into celebration. Nathaniel smiled, and Emily realized it was the first time she had seen him truly fully smile, not the careful expressions he had worn during their careful courtship, but something radiant and unguarded. We were married by arrangement, he said, but now we choose each other. That deserves recognition. As the day progressed, Emily found herself swept up in preparations for an impromptu celebration. The women painted symbols on her hands with red clay and plant dyes, marks that spoke of healing, of growth, of new beginnings. The men prepared a feast from the community stores, honoring the occasion with their finest foods. As evening fell, Emily stood beside Nathaniel before the central fire, surrounded by people who had become her family. Chief Running Bear spoke words of blessing in Apache. Then in English for Emily's benefit, today we witnessed people choosing love over duty, understanding over obligation, growth over fear. May their union bring harmony to their hearts and wisdom to their children. Nathaniel turned to Emily then, taking both her hands in his. I choose you, Emily Silverwolf, he said, his voice carrying across the gathering. Not because treaties require it, but because my heart recognizes yours. Emily felt tears she hadn't expected streaming down her cheeks, not tears of sorrow or fear, but of overwhelming gratitude. I choose you too, Nathaniel Silverwolf, she replied. I choose this life, this family, this love that asks nothing of me but to be myself. When they kissed, it was gentle and reverent, like a prayer offered to the darkening sky around them. The celebration continued, but Emily was aware only of this moment, this man. This profound sense of coming home to herself died as the stars emerged overhead. Emily understood that she had traveled far more than the distance between Millbrook and this Apache settlement. She had journeyed from invisibility to being truly seen, from silence to having her voice heard, from being unwanted to being chosen. And in choosing Nathaniel, really choosing him. With full knowledge and free will, she had also chosen herself. 6 months later, Emily knelt beside the stream where she had first learned to speak Nathaniel's language, her hands busy with the familiar work of preparing medicines. The spring air carried the scent of new growth and the sound of children's laughter. From the settlement behind her, little man approached, walking easily on the leg she had set the previous autumn. His limp was barely noticeable now, and he moved with the confident stride of a young man who had faced pain and emerged stronger. Yadi, Emily *, he said, settling beside her with the easy familiarity of family. Hottish Naltsus, what are you making? Emily smiled, switching effortlessly between languages as had become natural. Weech she replied. Red medicine. From the mountains, arthritis is troubling her again as she worked. Emily reflected on how much had changed since the frightening day when the men from Millbrook had tried to reclaim her. The settlement had grown closer in the wake of the confrontation, as if her choice to stay had somehow validated their own sense of community and belonging. Nathaniel appeared from the direction of the horse pastures, and Emily felt the familiar flutter of warmth that still surprised her with its intensity. Their marriage had deepened into something neither of them had expected, not just companionship or convenience, but genuine partnership built on respect, shared purpose, and love that had grown gradually like strong roots finding good soil. He said softly, using the endearment that meant my beloved woman. The council wants to speak with you. Emily looked up questioningly. The tribal council rarely called upon individuals unless there was significant business to discuss. They walked together toward the center of the settlement, where Chief Running Bear waited with several other elders. Emily noticed that they all wore expressions of ceremony and importance. Emily Silverwolf *. Chief Running Bear began formally. You have lived among us for one full cycle of seasons. You have learned our ways, shared our struggles, and proven yourself to be a true daughter of our people. Emily felt her pulse quicken, uncertain where this formal pronouncement was leading. Today, the chief continued, we offer you the recognition that should have been yours from the beginning. We offer you the title of *Katalia medicine woman. You will work alongside our traditional healers, bringing together the knowledge of two peoples for the benefit of all. Emily's breath caught in her throat. To be formally recognized as a healer, to have her skills acknowledged not as a useful accident, but as a calling worthy of respect. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. She whispered, the Apache word for gratitude, feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what she felt. As the formal ceremony concluded, Emily found herself surrounded by well-wishers from the community. from the mountain embraced her with tears in her eyes, speaking rapidly in Apache about pride and destiny. Water flows together presented her with a medicine bag crafted from the finest leather, decorated with symbols of healing and protection. But it was Ayanna who provided the moment Emily would remember most clearly. The little girl, now taller and more confident but still given to bursts of enthusiasm, pressed a small object into Emily's hands. It was a tiny woven figure, not a doll this time, but a representation of a woman with healing hands extended. The work was careful and beautiful, each strand of grass placed with intention and love. Asterisk for you, asterisk. Ayanna said in careful English, asterisk medicine woman who fixes everything, asterisk. Emily knelt to the child's level, overwhelmed by the simple perfection of the gift. Asterisk Najoni, asterisk. She said softly, asterisk ahihi. She is asterisk. Beautiful, thank you. My little one. That evening, as the settlement settled into the peaceful rhythms of night, Emily and Nathaniel sat beside their fire, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Emily turned the small woven figure over in her hands, marveling at how something so simple could hold so much meaning. Do you ever wonder, Nathaniel asked quietly, what would have happened if you had gone back with them? Emily considered this, imagining the life she might have lived in Millbrook, useful perhaps, valued for her skills, but never truly seen for who she was beneath those abilities. No, she said finally, I don't wonder about that path because I chose this one, and this one led me to myself. Nathaniel reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the natural ease of long practice. Asterisk ya nashni, asterisk, he said softly. I love you too, Emily replied, understanding filling her voice along with the words. In the distance, a mockingbird began its evening song, borrowing melodies from a dozen other birds and weaving them into something entirely new. Emily smiled, recognizing a kindred spirit in the creature that had learned to take what it was given and transform it into something beautiful and uniquely its own. She had come to this place as Emily Thompson, the unwanted daughter, the woman too large for her world's expectations. She had become Emily Silverwolf, healer and beloved wife, a woman who had learned that being seen clearly was the greatest medicine of all. And in the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the sounds of a community at peace, Emily understood that she was finally, completely, and irrevocably home. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next story.